In short, you are alone in the world, absolved of all responsibility except to your own interest. Isn't that marvelous?
Welcome to Cold War Cinema, a podcast about the shifting cultural, political, and aesthetic currents running through movies made during the Cold War. My name is Jason Christian, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Tony Ballas and Paul Klein. We have a special guest with us today, the writer, director, and producer Adam McKay. Yes, you heard that right, Adam McKay. And he's going to help us discuss John Frankenheimer's 1966 sci-fi drama, Seconds. Welcome to the podcast, Adam.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed your film analysis, and definitely a unique voice in a weird American culture that we live in. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. And yeah, thanks again for taking the time to join us. So we're going to talk about Frankenheimer's Seconds, but before we jump in there, I wanted to ask a question or two about your own work and sort of your relationship to political cinema, and that might help us segue to the film. And I know my co-hosts have some questions as well. You know, if you look at your entire body of work, to me, it's very obvious that it's all political because you're clearly lampooning all the absurdities and the excessive, outrageous aspects of American culture and our institutions and so forth. But there did seem to be a shift with the last three films to an even more overtly political perspective. The Big Short, Vice, and Don't Look Up. And I guess, do you agree with how I've framed your work is the first question, and I'd just love to hear you talk about those last three films and how that came to be, what led to that kind of direction. Anything you want. Take your time.
Of course. You're spot on. I mean, always going back to my days in Chicago when I was doing Second City, which is a big satirical comedy theater in Chicago that people like Dan Aykroyd and Mike Myers came out of. And then the crowd I was hanging with, we created the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, which started as a very political street theater group. And then I was lucky enough to get hired at Saturday Night Live. And a lot of the sketches I wrote through that were, about politics, class, the oligarchy, sort of the epistemological ways that we view the world that are bullshit. And then when I finally, Will Ferrell and I always joked when we were shooting Anchorman, we were like, how the hell did this happen that they're giving us the equipment and they're giving us like the talented crew and department heads, and the scene where that really hit, and it's one of my favorite outtakes, is when Ferrell is very, seriously explaining to Applegate's character, Alicia Corningstone, that San Diego is an old phrase that translates to a whale's vagina. And he couldn't get through it because, and then there's one take where he just laughs and he's like, it's just ridiculous. And there are these cameras. So there's no question those early movies with Farrell were all kind of, Anchorman was clearly driven by the fact that our news media was becoming sort of a shameless, good hair infotainment kind of endeavor. And Farrell and I were just old enough to remember when the news was never perfect, but it served some purpose. And then Talladega Nights, I think, is really obvious. It's about, sort of pride and corporate sponsorship and the individual, blah, blah, blah. But and then Step Brothers, which is the one that people are always very surprised when I tell them it's our most political movie, because it's all about how capitalism, unregulated capitalism, turns us into giant babies.
Indeed.
And you guys probably knew that, but a lot of, and by the way, the French critics knew that. When I did the interviews, they're like, the anger from Step Brothers. And I was like, ah. And then the other guys was the pivot point. That was when I spent all this time constructing an allegory for the financial collapse. Like the entire movie, like I thought about every chunk of it, and no one got it. Like there wasn't one review, by the way, not their fault. I learned something in that experience, and I'm like, I think American society is, become very complicated, and we need to be way more naked about what we're saying, fully aware that there's a kind of, fetishistic side to film criticism that loves subtlety and buried meaning, which, by the way, I do too. And so, and then Anchorman 2, I don't know if I have that order right, but I mean, that was kind of a chance to do Anchorman over again, but say it way more nakedly. And also, we were curious, can you do a good comedy sequel? I don't think we quite pulled it off, but and then The Big Short was, I had read that book. It was one of those books I read in like one night, and I was like, this is it. And from that point on, I don't think it works to look at the stuff that I've shot, written, done without also looking at where America is, because I have people all the time ask me, why don't you go back to the absurd, funny movies? And I'm like, have you looked around? They're actively building dozens and dozens of, concentration camps around the country. Like our government is just a free flowing canal of corrupt money. The climate is about to probably tip over a threshold in like 2 years. So that was when I was like, fuck it. And I started to feel like an urgency, which really you kind of see in Vice. And then Don't Look Up is the final kind of, I call those three movies the collapse trilogy. It's Big Short, Vice, and Don't Look Up, because once America accepted that we would have an extrajudicial torture program, it was kind of game over at that point. And then once you had this chattering class, kind of liberal centrists yelling at people to shut up and that Obama shouldn't prosecute the torturers or the bankers or anyone. That was the time where I was really like, we are in deep trouble. And that kind of directly led to Don't Look Up. Anyway, very long answer.
No, that's a wonderful answer. And I feel that despair seeping into Don't Look Up because there is no feeling of an opposition party. And then what do you do? Because despair is so widespread among people, although yeah, it's a big conversation.
Well, one thing I would say about Don't Look Up and the ending where they fail is that we weren't really aiming for despair. What we wanted to show people was that despite 100 and, what is it, 20 years of feature film storytelling, a happy ending is not guaranteed because we were noticing once the data and science on climate became like really alarming that there was this assumption that the powers that be would take care of it. So I'm actually a big believer that we have all the tools and powers that we need to deal with all of these crises. It's just that we've, been conditioned, marketed, lied to, habituated towards a feeling of helplessness and that original ideas aren't worth entertaining. Anyway, I had to say that about the end of Don't Look Up.
I love like where you're sort of going with this last answer, about that there we still have some agency. That even though our narratives might suggest otherwise, and by that I don't necessarily mean the happy endings of movies, but the narratives, the discourse that surrounds us, that we have that. I'm a big believer in it. I'm the group's radical optimist. So I'm curious, given everything you've just said, where are you looking right now for that kind of optimism or hope? What's getting you out of bed every morning to do good or something?
So there are a bunch of different arenas that I think good things are going to come out of. Number one is the fact that the marketing, advertising, algorithmic manipulation that Adam Curtis, the documentarian, has chronicled so well, that has led us to this strange place where half the people are pretending everything is fine. There's one silver bullet or stake that cuts through that, and it's reality. It's collapse. And that moment is clearly coming. I mean, I learned enough about how the modern landscape of financialization and private equity style economics works to know that there's zero chance this ends well. And sort of like the Black Plague reordered Europe, even though it's one of the most horrific episodes in human history, if you look at what came out of it, a lot of good came out of it because it destroyed old orders. It made Europe more open to the Islamic empire's, breakthroughs with science, math, architecture. So anyway, that's one. Although that's still a little depressing. That's like collapse is our friend. It's a bit of an accelerationist point of view. But the second thing I would say is, man, science we've just never tried when it comes to climate.
Mhm.
And, we're looking at potentially in 2027, we could start to hit 1.7 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial, which is fucking mind blowing. And that means we'll have several months above 2 degrees Celsius. And anyone who says they know what that is going to result in is lying. And there's no way it results in good things. But the science is incredible. And we just have so many brilliant minds that haven't been unleashed. And then the third thing is that we are starting to see flickers of people, regular people, working people, to be anything other than left wing, socialist, whatever you want to call it, is nuts. I mean, it's the result of a lot of marketing, a lot of manipulation. And that guy who just won in the bright red district in Texas, Mamdani winning in New York against the establishment Dems, Republicans. You look at what's going on in the UK with the Green Party is now ascendant and kind of starting to trounce the Tories and Labour, thank God. So yeah, I think there's legitimate cause for, I wouldn't say optimism, but I don't know what's between optimism and pessimism. For Trent,
Cautious optimism.
there we go. Extremely cautious, frightened hope.
I'm going to ask a far less erudite question than my colleague. I'm very curious just about some of the films that influenced you politically that you can think of. Some of the films or filmmakers. I know that we likely will be talking about one of those in a little bit. We're talking about seconds, but I know that you're a fan of Mike Judge, for instance. I'm also a big fan of Mike Judge and Sidney Lumet and his films. But I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's I think what it was when I was young, it wasn't so much that, when you're 17 or 15, you're responding in a very muscular way to films. So I saw a movie like Apocalypse Now. I was a kid. I was born in the late 60s, grew up in the 70s, early 80s. So we were getting hammered with that. Vietnam, we would have won if it weren't for the nerds and the communists and the news media. And when I saw Apocalypse Now, and even though I knew it wasn't, it's an adaptation of Heart of Darkness, still seeing My Lai represented and the chaos and the savagery, that was the first movie that I saw that contradicted the narrative I was being given. And it was the first time that it kind of ignited my internal moral compass or candle or whatever you want to call it. So that was a big one. And then you guys know, once you get rolling, it's joyous. It's through my late teens, all through my 20s. But there are certain movies that stand apart and I go back to over and over again. No Bears, Jafar Panahi, even though it's recent, is a movie that I'm in awe of. And I just think it's so good. Election, Alexander Payne. And you could almost couple that with Citizen Ruth. I long for him to go back to those days. And no question, Mike Judge. You know, it's weird. Whit Stillman had a bunch of movies when I was young, but I didn't know that he was an actual right winger. I just assumed they were satire. So, like, Barcelona is one of my all-time. He had to know. And then Verhoeven is huge. Starship Troopers, RoboCop. Oh my God! Like Verhoeven's a titan as far as that close to the vest, satire, entertainment, cheesy, highbrow. I mean, that's kind of, and you know, they live, John Carpenter, which
Mm.
I'm a big fan of, like filmmakers that are viewed as grimy genre filmmakers, but actually have all the good shit, like Mike Judge and
Yes.
Carpenter and Verhoeven and even the Simpsons, or you know, that kind of stuff. Populist, you know, status quo challenging stuff is my favorite.
No, thank you for that. That all lines up. It all adds up.
These two guys are huge Simpson fans. Like, and I like Simpsons too, but I haven't seen it in forever. And they're like they know all the references and
In its prime, I haven't seen it in years, but in its prime, oh my God. I mean,
There's
maybe
nothing like it.
No,
nothing. One of the I was for the 3 years I was head writer at SNL. I had a rule in my writer's room where I was like, no one's allowed to say The Simpsons already did this, because they had done everything. And it was like, oh my God, George Meyer, like I got to meet him and I was like a nervous, you know, goon. And you know, like no one else meets him like that. Yeah, yeah. When that shit's good, Wonder shows it also
Oh
is a
yeah.
big influence on what I do, and I go back to it. Yeah.
why don't we turn to seconds? I asked you if you'd come on the show and you jumped at it, and I was like, yes, that sounds great. What are we going to cover? And you threw out a few suggestions, and one of the few was seconds. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that you hadn't seen it in quite some time, and I'm wondering why that lingered with you and what made you choose that. Like, how did you come across it at the first time? Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, you know, I think it was because of Antoni Oni that I had watched that trilogy, the what is it, L'Avventura, La Clese, and I forget the third name, but I became really interested in that period in the 1950s into the 60s into kind of the mid 70s, where you know, we forget that the industrial revolution is brand new.
Mm.
Everyone talks about it like it's some dusty concept, but like up until 170 years ago, the concept of even having a job didn't exist. Everything was subsistence. In fact,
Mhm.
the word job comes from a word, I'm trying to remember its origin. It might be like Welsh, a word for yob, which meant someone who has a bunch of sticks in their mouth. That's like a yob. So there started to be these really rich guys who were showing up once the Industrial Revolution hit, and they would just hire people to do shit for them. So the whole concept of leisure time, of a job, of like having the weekends off, which you guys know wasn't until what, the 1920s when
Mhm.
organized labor demanded it. I love the idea that, and you start to see it in movies like the Hitchcock movie, A Shadow of a Doubt, opens with that young girl experiencing something that is really new in the 500,000 year history of Homo sapiens, which is she has downtime. She's like bored, and you could tell, like, someone needs to give this girl something. Her mind is wandering, and it's such a cool movie because you can tell this is a new concept. And then La Ventura, which is one of my all-time favorites, you can just tell that, like, Antonioni, the actors, everyone, they're contending with this idea of, like, what the fuck does life mean now that there are, like, I used to bake bread and tend to a garden and have 7 kids. Like that, what's her name? Monica Vitti, the star of that used to be my life. Now, what the holy hell is this? And so I love that dissociation from kind of, existence. I mean, it goes deep, those. And Seconds was a movie I remember seeing a long time ago. And my first thought was, how the hell did he get this made? I mean, this is a borderline straight up communist movie. And the ending, watching it again, I had forgotten how brutal and stuff. I mean, holy, there's an argument to be made. That's the most brutal ending in the history of Hollywood. And you guys probably know it was like booed at Cannes. Yeah. It was just savage when it came out. And I was reading about that, and I was like, yeah, that track.
Fantastic. You took that in lots of different directions that I didn't imagine, and I really like that answer. This movie's really good, guys. I thought it was a fantastic movie. And you hear a lot about Alan J. Pakula's Paranoia trilogy, but I feel like John Frankenheimer beat him to it by a decade with his Manchurian Candidate, 7 Days in May, and Seconds. They're so steeped in paranoia. And that's sort of the zeitgeist of the time. And I'm wondering, like, does that resonate with you, Adam, or do you want to comment on that sort of paranoia that's just captured, how it's captured in the film? Because to me, the production is really impressive. The way that the cinematography, of course, the editing, even the sound design, just the way that that's put together. I'd love to hear a filmmaker's perspective on just that production of depicting paranoia.
The key is that cinematographer, what's his name?
James Wong Howe.
Yeah. And because, we had seen some kind of stuff like that at that point. If you were living in the late 50s, early 60s, at that point, they're starting to get Twilight Zone going. And there were moments in this movie where I was reminded of the Twilight Zone, but that DP would not let it go there. And the shooting is so good with the wide personal lenses that will not, like, the Twilight Zone is kind of designed to be allegory. And it's one of my favorite shows ever. But the fact that that DP would not let it have that middle distance of allegory and made it personal is what, for me, watching it again, and we watched it with some friends, and at the end, I kind of had to, like, apologize. Like, I don't remember it being this bleak. And that's an example where a director of photography, and by the way, I'm sure Frankenheimer was right. I mean, Frankenheimer is a great director. I'm sure he was right in sync with his DP, but holy crap, man, those impressionistic wide lenses killed me.
If you still have friends after you screened that movie, perhaps they're comrades.
By the way, they kind of are. They're cool people.
This DP, James Wong Howe, also photographed The Thin Man. His career is just one of these wild careers where he's working from the late 20s all the way through the end of the 60s into the 70s. His last film is Funny Lady, the Funny Girl sequel. So it's like just a wild career, but to see you, if you showed me Seconds and didn't tell me who photographed it and showed me Thin Man, I'd say there's just no way that one person could do those because they're so distinct. And so I mean, certainly Seconds isn't even of its moment. It's just something beyond. It feels like it's sort of being beamed to us from a different universe in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's sort of like the idea that when the Beatles started, if you look at those first couple of the albums, they're total boy band albums. Like they're doing covers of Chuck Berry songs. And then you go to the White Album and you're like, how the hell did
LSD, that's how.
by the way, fair enough. We can
And there
That'll
is
do it.
there is a hippie wine orgy scene in this movie too.
Oh my God, is
I
there
forgot about that
ever?
scene.
Do you know the Catholic Church censored that scene?
I'm not surprised.
The original version had nudity. And, it's a big, I mean, that's what's hilarious about this movie. It's a big studio movie. Like, it is not screwing around. Like, it's full release marketing. And the idea that the Catholic Church was like, no, no, no. And the studio was like, you got it.
It's wild to see the Paramount logo come up every time because you
Yes.
just go, that can't be right. There's no way. And then it goes into these credits. But I just read this too, that I didn't know this, that this cut of the film that any of us are watching today was only released here in America in 97. So for 30 years, Americans didn't see 7 minutes of this film. It's this nudity because of the church.
Oh, is that true? So the one he watched was the unedited.
The European cut.
Ah.
The Europeans got to see it. Yeah.
So there's probably yet another even more risque version with because they're clearly nude, right? And they just cut it right where you couldn't quite see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene comes out of nowhere, and you're like, how did they get Rock Hudson to get naked in a hippie pagan orgy scene?
Well, he's Rock Hudson.
Fair enough. One of the things that's really interesting, you mentioned the close-ups. I mean, there's so many expressive scenes when the very opening, it goes for a long time without any dialogue, which was a risky move. This is like art house cinema kind of thing. But that actor's name is John Randolph, and he's just so convincing as this guy that's like very tormented, and just the camera's right in his face. Some of the sound design when he's on the train.
Yeah, I've always loved the period of filmmaking where everything in sound was added in post, except dialogue. And my favorite is just like, Fellini's first 8 movies, that fake wind sound you hear all the time, like, Bella, Bella, like, and there's something so abstracted about the idea of using sound like that I really love. We considered it for Vice, the first third of the movie, doing all post sound. And I love it. I think there's an art to it. Like you look at old movies like HUD, and it's always that fake wind sound. And when you're talking about a movie where the premise is that he's living a sham life, it's perfect.
That's a good observation. James Wong Howe also shot HUD. And I think this,
Oh, wow. Wow.
yeah, he also shot The Sweet Smell of Success, which is just a fantastic
So
film.
good.
Yeah, and we covered a film called Body and Soul that he also shot. So he did some really fantastic films. Let me just ask this point blank. What makes this a Cold War film? Like how does it seem to be a Cold War film? And we kind of touched on this already, but like maybe dig in a bit more on that.
I mean, for me, when you told me we're emphasizing Cold War films, I thought of that in between period where you had a very lefty, mostly Hollywood. You had an America that had just done well because of socialist ideas like rationing, the military, women working in factories, the GI Bill, the Marshall Plan. So you have this very left wing course going on while you have industry freaking out and, having control over the Dulles brothers,
Mm.
Eisenhower. And I thought like Frankenheimer might have gotten in the last movie, the last true left wing movie of that period of Hollywood, which is why I was so shocked when I first watched it. And, Manchurian Candidate is one thing, like that gets into kind of MK Ultra sort of mind control stuff, which we now know was true. But Seconds really gets into the existential core question of, do you really want to be a worker for the 1%? And what is your system of meaning when you live in a completely capitalist society? And it makes a lot of sense that, like, the people at Cannes and American ticket buyers would have hated this movie because holy crap, like, I mean, it's clear that Frankenheimer used every chip that he had to make
Mm.
this movie. So to me, it's a great moment where the Cold War was still up for grabs, where, how many years earlier, what, like 10 years earlier, Khrushchev had called Eisenhower and said, hey, can we chill out with the Cold War? And the Dulles brothers told Eisenhower, it's a trap. And we just kept going. And, Kennedy's assassination, the Cuban Missile Crisis. So it's really a remarkable film. And I'm sure I'm forgetting three or four others. But as far as there really was an ideological Cold War going on to match the paranoia military industrial complex Cold War. And this movie is so striking. And I don't want to, spoiler alert, but we have to talk about the ending at some point. So to me, it kind of came to mind as a Cold War film that's not just totally jingoistic, sort of
Mm.
America's free, and that exists in kind of a gray area.
Can I pop in on that, Adam? I mean, I think that you make such a great point about the way that the film is really poking at America from America. And so something we've been doing this season here is we're calling it our dialectical season, where we've been watching an American film and a Soviet film back and forth together. And so we've been watching a lot of American Cold War cinema from the 1950s, where the concern is the outside. The concern is Soviets, communists, explicitly. Films like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, or what I Married a Communist, that are
The Thing, yeah.
right, that
Original,
are sort of
yeah.
very explicit with what they're doing, and here it sort of reverses itself, and it's very explicit, but it's like the call is coming from inside the house. The existential threat to America no longer are sort of the mindless automatons of the Soviet Union. They're the mindless automatons of American capital. And it's a just like it once you see it, it like wallops you right in the face.
It's interesting because the book that it's based on, which I did not know about, but even at a quick glance, the writer of that book wrote some really interesting novels. And one that really stuck out for me is one called The Tour. And it's a sci-fi novel about how, in some, future world, but not too far off, there's a company that takes uber wealthy people down to South America and simulates like sex, guerrilla warfare, all this kind of stuff. And I was reading about it and I was just like, that's a cool guy. Like that he was hip to the fact that the Dulles brothers and the US government were already orchestrating coups,
Mm.
levying influence, because clearly that's what that story is. Yeah, I really look at it. If you look at the four movies he did before this, because Frankenheimer also directed Birdman of Alcatraz, which was a big hit movie. And it's really a case where God bless him. He really kind of pushed his chips in on this, and it just could not have crashed harder and been more hated. And then if you look at his filmography, he kind of goes to like a low level, and then he comes back as kind of a big director into the 70s. Also, I love that his son is Michael Bay is just so
I
you
I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. That for a long time there was a rumor. Someone please fact check me on this because I'm putting this together from a bunch of things I've read, but there was a rumor forever that Michael Bay was Frankenheimer's, quote, illegitimate son. And I had read like 7 or 8 years ago that it was verified, which I always laughed about because it seems like something a critic would say. Like, this is like it's directed by the illegitimate son of John. And it really was. But fact check me on that. But I'm 95% sure that's true.
Wow.
Okay, I've done a very quick fact check, and what I'm finding very quickly is that he was told this, but DNA results said
Ah,
that he was not the father.
all right.
Uh,
Great.
but
Can you
but this is me doing a Google.
I honestly spend no time thinking about Michael Bay. So that was the most regurgitated fourth rate sort of internet information. You can leave it in or not,
No, we'll
but
leave
I
it in.
love that it was a rumor and there was a DNA test.
That's a
Well,
great rumor.
the rumor is a cultural artifact in itself.
All right.
What did the studio, as long as we're thinking about like actual things that happen, what did the studio do? Did they get angry at the end result? I didn't look at the like history of how the studio itself reacted, like, oh, this is the movie we paid for.
I mean, they were not happy. They lost money. He was the hot director. They apparently wanted to cast Laurence Olivier as the lead, and Paramount was like, no, he's not big enough. We want Rock Hudson, which, by the way, I think is the greatest casting ever, given that
Yes.
Rock Hudson was in the closet, knew about Second Lives, and it's one of his great performances, but no, they were not happy. I'm sure they had looked at his previous three or four films and just slotted it in that this would make that money, and it lost. But of
Yeah.
course, now it's considered a classic, it's beloved. So
Yeah.
probably around like 1997, there were executives at Paramount that were like, "We love that movie," because it's like Office Space. The executives who made that probably got fired, but the executives three generations later are raking in the dough.
I suppose
Yeah.
if they thought it was defensible, they wouldn't have cut it from based on the church's recommendation, but they went along with that. I mean, it made 1.7 million at the American and Canadian box office on a $2.5 million budget. So it was a real turkey.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the previous film that Frankenheimer made was The Train, which is a fantastic movie. And it's interesting follow-up because that's very much a war film that many people would like, that's easy to like, basically, for an American movie-going audience. And then he comes along with this horrific medical horror, which is another type of horror that we haven't even mentioned.
Oh
Because
my gosh.
because at the time there were actually quite a few films around the world about people getting face transplants that go horribly wrong. There was a film called Eyes Without a Face, the French film, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fantastic, just really creepy movie. And then there's a Japanese film in the 60s about a face transplant.
And
So
this
it's a
one,
whole,
this in Frankenheimer's film, they use apparently they use actual footage from a rhinoplasty surgery in that sequence.
Wow, really?
Yes, and evidently, some trivia. Frankenheimer was stopped by someone on the street many years later, and this person said, uh, "I love working with you. I love working on you." He didn't
Stop.
recognize him. He said, "Oh, I'm the guy who's in the stock footage of my rhinoplasty
No.
film." Yeah, because the one of the one of the assistant cinematographers, someone had the brilliant idea to use that real footage because he had shot
Wow.
medical surgeries or whatever. It's just interesting trivia. Yeah.
I
It gives the film
actually
some realistic, feel.
I put my heart attack in Vice. At one point, there's a shot of a clogged artery kind of pulsating. And I had, during post of Vice, being the incredibly smart individual that I am, after a lifetime of eating cheesesteaks and smoking cigarettes, had a heart attack, a pretty scary one, although it turned out fine. There was no damage. And fortunately, it was like back part of the heart lower. So I'm all right. And they film that when they do it so the doctor can look at it. And I brought it in for my editor, Hank Corwin. And he was like, "Oh, I'll get this right in there." And it's actually in the movie. Yeah.
I remember that scene. I just watched Vice recently and I was like, wow, interesting choice. I didn't know that was
Yeah.
You didn't
Yeah.
recognize him?
I didn't recognize your heart.
You look closely, you can tell that's an Irish American guy in his mid 50s. Yeah.
Uh, you know, I was thinking about like other kind of depictions of like the nameless company that's kind of diabolically behind the scenes, and it made me think of the Truman Show as kind of a film that kind of captures some of the themes of this movie in interesting ways.
Mhm.
A guy there's this company where the head of the company's godlike in a certain way. And do you have any thoughts on that? Like the way that that company is depicted
It's
and the
funny
way that the
because, oh yeah, you hear that a lot from that period. I mean, the movie immediately I thought of was Parallax View.
Hmm.
Don't they
Mhm.
even call it the company? And then it's kind of implied it's the CIA. And uh, that's a big trope, kind of early 60s to mid 70s, the company. And
Mhm.
to me, that clicks with the rise of film noir, which became kind of the hallmark American genre from the 30s on. And film noir can't exist without the Industrial Revolution and the idea of nebulous companies and forces that create moral gray areas. It's yeah, it's perfect. What's the other movie? There's another big movie that does it. Anyway, it's kind of perfect for that time. And you know what's great about it? They were right. I mean, we,
Right.
we now have Palantir and Chat GBT or whatever the hell it's called. I mean, we have Bank of America. Like, there are literally like 18 completely nefarious, far reaching corporations that are determining 97% of the outcomes of all policy, the market. So, yeah, they credit to the early 60s to the mid 70s. They nailed that.
And it's so interesting that, the film was not a success, but it did go on to influence things like Parallax View. Uh, but also, I mean, clearly, any one of our listeners out there who's seen the show Severance will adore this film if they're fans of that show, because that show is an adaptation, one could argue, of Seconds. Some of the tropes and some of the depictions are directly referenced in that show. But I almost feel like this film is the first depiction of the company so intimately entangled with capitalism and so
Mm.
explicitly entangled with capitalism, uh, in a way where it's not veiled, it's not suggestive, it's almost direct. And I thought that was a striking feature of this film. But also the show Mad Men. It also makes me think of Mad
Oh,
Men.
that's good.
The corporate
I
art on the walls that's kind of impressionistic in the 60s and so forth. I mean, it's all there. It's all in this show. This is like the movie that started that whole trend later on in the second golden age of cinema, or whatever people call it, or television, excuse me.
There's a short film, Adam, that you made, by the way, that I don't know if this will surprise you to hear, but it's called The Procedure
Yes.
with Willem Dafoe. And I watched it recently for the first time. And Willem Dafoe's character gets, is it Willem Dafoe? Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
He gets this like listening device implanted in his ear where he can listen to music all day long or whatever.
Yeah, the premise is that whatever your peak song is, what's the song that is your greatest moments, that you
Yeah.
can get it implanted and it plays all the time. And these people flourish and you see them around the office. And Defoe's character gets Private Eyes by Hall and Oates. And you start to see all the characters, their brain just fritzes out. And you know what's funny? SNL never aired that. For a year, I was like, hey, come on, you gotta, Lauren would not put it on for whatever reason. But yeah, and when we were shooting that, I told my DP, who was a really talented DP, I was like, this is like the Twilight Zone. And that was, although we did it in color, but totally, that is a great, great grandnephew of Seconds.
Yeah, for sure. I could see that that it is in the spirit of Seconds with more kind of like absurdist humor added in. But there is some humor in Seconds. I did feel like there's some funny moments in that film. Not like laugh out loud funny, but there is some kind of like satirical
Yeah.
things. Um, what do can we just talk about the ending because it is brutal and
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh my God." This is the part that's like hard to watch.
I mean, I'm trying to think in the history of Hollywood, has there ever been? The only one I can kind of think of is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh yeah.
But even in that case, it's like his friend, there's a bond. The friend, even though
Mm.
euthanizes him, there is some connection. This ending is just, I mean, I'll say it, spoiler alert, stop if you don't want to know. It's it's literally the surgeon who gave him the second false curated top of the heap capitalistic life. Now they realize he's not going to ever accept it. So they have to stage an accident so some other rich guy can start a second life. Otherwise, their corporation or company collapses. So the
Mhm.
end of the movie is a drill going through the back of Rock Hudson's head, and you hear the sound like, and then they go to this weird, distorted, like shot of him with his young daughter on a beach, and then it goes it goes right to the Paramount logo. And it's in I like I'm trying to think like, can you guys think of a more grim Hollywood ending? Um
The only one I can think of that's nowhere near as grim, but that is like bleak and of this moment, it would maybe be Planet of the Apes. Uh,
oh,
which
that's
is
good.
not as grim at all, but like you blew it up, feels like uh when you watch it in the context of 1968 and not the context of Stop the Planet of the Apes, I want to get off. You are like, this is really tough.
You only saving grace to that is it's a reveal, so your mind is catching up. And it's a little bit abstract because you're looking at a symbol of American, Western civilization. So, yes, it is brutal, but your mind has to do like four things to kind of, whereas I would say the ending of Seconds, your
Yeah.
mind has to do nothing. It's a drill hitting bone, and then it's a shot of a father's daughter.
The only other movie that came to mind is Johnny Got His Gun, which was directed by Dalton Trumbo. The only movie he directed based on his own novel. That came out in 1973 and it's pretty bleak, but it's not as bleak as this. No.
I haven't seen that. I gotta watch that. I just saw the French adaptation of the Jim Thompson novel. What's it called? Pop 140 or
Oh,
whatever.
oh, okay.
Yeah, and it's called Clean Slate. I can't remember the
Haven't
French.
seen that one.
The ending of that's pretty grim, but I mean, there's a lot of film noir endings that are tough, but bone like a drill in bone.
And they don't even put him asleep first. He's still
Oh,
awake.
No, it's you. I mean, it's not only that you're hearing the drill and seeing the images, but you've got a minute of him screaming, and it's like it's full screams in a way that it feels so not 1966 because it is so direct and in your face with the way that it's presented orally and visually.
if I were going to recut that movie, which I never should be allowed to, but I would only make two changes.
Okay.
One is Frankenheimer always said he regretted cutting a scene where he went to see his grown daughter,
Hmm.
and I would love to see that. And the second change I would make is at the end when the drill comes and he's screaming, I would just fade in like mega death and play it into the Paramount logo. And that would be it. And I would go to sleep that night knowing that Frankenheimer in heaven is like, yep, good work.
Head banging.
Anyone, from Criterion or whatever is listening to this, I'd say
We
take
can
Adam
put
up
it
on this
together an
idea.
alternate.
Do an
Yeah, I don't know
alternate.
how you guys do it at Criterion. Like if you can contact Paramount and I'll re-edit like Adam McKay, the guy who did Step Brothers, re-edit 5 masterpieces.
That's a box set I would buy.
Oh yeah, top dollar.
I would do Apocalypse Now, and the only change I would make is instead of Sheen or Brando whispering the horror, the horror, I would just have him say, it's all so fucked up. It's fucked. Only change. And then I would have one song in the middle. I would do like Aha, Take On Me, or like them getting used to each other on the boat.
I think we should have a whole episode of just you providing alternative edits to classic Hollywood films. If you ever want to come back, and we'll just talk about how you would change Casablanca, how you would change Gone with the Wind, all the classics.
Clean, Mr. Clean. He was straight out of some godforsaken ghetto. And one look at him, take on me, take on me. And then there was Chief. It may have been my mission, but it was sure as shit his boat. Take on me.
Um, guys, is there anything else to say about this movie? Did we do it justice? Is there any lingering thoughts on what to say about Seconds?
I just have one thought, and I'll throw it out to everyone, and even in the form of a question. I mean, this film has so many um, elements and themes that are relevant to American politics, and I'd say of our era, but I would say even of February 2026 specifically. You have these corporate bacchanalia,
Mm.
corporate backed bacchanalia, perhaps is a better way to put it. You have sexual blackmail as a very subversive trope from 1960s, I would say, something that's very relevant to our time.
Mm.
This film seems to be enduring in a way. I'm wondering, what does it mean to watch it in 2026 and to talk about it in 2026? And why should we be watching it from now and hence?
I thought for me, it hit harder than when I saw it 30 years ago. Like it was much more like an open-handed slap to the face, whereas when I saw it, whenever I watched it, like 1997 or whatever, it was earlier than that, probably early 90s. I processed it pretty easily then because we still had a culture and elements and institutions that were fighting against unregulated capitalism and the reorientation of identity and community to fit the needs of big capital. So I think it's a great point, Anthony. I think like this movie hits way harder. I just think that if you told me 2 months from now there is a service where they redo your face and you got I wouldn't even blink. I would just be like, of course there is.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it perfectly. It's like you, I think the first time I saw this, a few years ago, you see it and you go, okay, this is a tough movie. Isn't Alienation shitty? Like, doesn't it suck to not be happy? And then there is something, Tony, as you bring up, about watching this right now, and sort of going like, yeah, okay, somebody out there probably is going to pay 30 grand to get blackmailed, and
Yeah.
then be part of this whole thing. And it's on the one hand, it sometimes it feels like it's so in your face about it that it can sort of take on the veneer of unbelievability. The fact that in order for all of these people to be processed through surgical procedures, they first go through a butcher, right? Like they go through a slaughterhouse, and then they get into a car like with sides of beef, and it feels like maybe this is too much, but it never is too much. It never ventures into it's darkly comic, but it's never overtly funny.
Right.
And I do think, yeah, exactly as you said, that if you told me that this was a new function of SpaceX, I would go, yeah, that makes sense. Or, like what's the one where he puts speaking of your procedure, what's the one where he puts the computer chip in your brain now,
Neuralink. Yeah.
Neuralink, right? Like I would be like, yes, this is uh this is not only something that I can imagine, but also if you told me they've been doing this for 30 years behind the scenes, and are now taking it public, I would be like, wow, I sound like a crackpot, but okay.
Well, you guys have, I'm sure, heard about the free market food sourcing that's going on because my cousin, who I haven't seen in a while, he lives in New Hampshire. He just used that app and sold his left foot so that a billionaire industrialist could eat it. But he was able to pay off his daughter's college and he was able to pay off his student debt and they got a deck on their house. And when
Wait,
he
really?
told me, oh, you've read about this, right?
No, fucking hell. I was like, I wouldn't be surprised. I was kind of surprised.
5 years ago, I start saying that joke, and you all are like, fuck you. The fact that you waited 4 or 5 seconds before realizing
I was like, this can't be real.
Watching Jason's face just then was beautiful because you could see him go, is it impolite to
Exactly. Yeah.
By the way, you guys probably all knew instantly, but it's vaguely plausible. So seconds, yeah. I've been going back to the original idea that this movie hits way harder now. There's a lot of movies like that though,
Hmm.
that hit way harder. And you have you ever there's a movie called Silent Running with Bruce Dern. That's a movie that, when it came out, was a great environmental sci-fi movie. And if you watch it now, it'll rip your heart out. So yeah, a bunch of those 60s, 70s movies have taken that jump.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. Do you feel like some of that is a product of all of us getting older and seeing movies through different eyes as we've learned more about how the world is, or is more of it? I'll answer part of my question. I think some of that is true, but is more part of it that everything else has moved such a way that like the system has moved, that capitalism has changed in such a way that that you can't help but see these what used to be science fiction as maybe just fiction.
I really do think there's been a progression or a regression that's gone on. If you
Mhm.
look at all the deregulation from, it really even started back with Kennedy cutting the top tax rate, and it goes through Carter, and then obviously with Reagan, big capital has its hands firmly on the wheel. And the way I kind of can verify that is that if you were the CEO of a major corporation and your sole job is to get stock prices up, which we
Mhm.
know legally and definitionally that is your sole job. And you can kind of look at like the early outsourcing, what was his name? Jack Welch from General Electric. And then you go to the post Clinton China most favored nation status, NAFTA, GATT level of outsourcing. And you view it all as CEOs and boards and executives looking for their bonuses.
Mm.
At a certain point, it was like about 4 or 5 years ago, I started talking to a couple of friends like, they have nowhere to go to get their bonuses except slave labor. And if you look at what's happening with the detainment
Uh-huh.
centers, which are really work labor concentration camps, it's a really accurate lens to look through our time through is pretend you're a CEO or a major investor. And then you can do it with climate too. And it's the data is like rock solid. We're not older and imagining it. You can see like literally 50 graphs that show you we're on the verge of an unlivable climate. So that
Yeah.
question is kind of the question because everything about our culture is trying to make us doubt ourselves, and our news media has been totally captured. But if you go to hard data, hard data may be a socialist or communist best friend because it is super clear income
Mm.
inequality, defense spending, the climate, the levels of plastic particulates in our food. Like, I mean, someone should put out a 500-page book called just fucking graphs. And
Well,
I do
just
think.
as oh, I just wanted to say that just as the seconds is more relevant today than ever before, perhaps also Marx's Capital is more relevant to our present time.
whoa,
That's a book full of graphs,
holy
right?
shit.
It kind of tells you that Adam, maybe we need that adaptation of that particular book that Eisenstein was never able to do.
The movie I've always wanted to make, but I realized there's a 0% chance to make it in the US. I think one of the great figures of the entire 20th century is Ho Chi Minh. And
Mm.
I think if most people knew his real story, it's mind blowing. I mean, the fact that he was a waiter at the Paris Peace Treaty and saw insane was a poet. He defeated the two biggest imperial powers of that. Like that, I was joking with Bong Joon-ho about it. I was like, Director Bong, what are the odds we could ever make a Ho Chi Minh biopic? And he was like, oh, I don't think so.
Let's GoFundMe it or what, like let's crowdsource it.
I'll direct it. If you get, what would we need? Because it's period. We probably need at its scrappiest, like 25 million. Like you can't do all that wardrobe and time jumps and war, but like you can even say like 20 million. So if you get a GoFundMe,
Yeah, for 20 minutes.
We'll ask our.
All right,
we'll
we need a
ask
few
our,
more listeners,
our
but
listeners,
if
yeah.
everyone kicks in a few bucks.
Few bucks here.
Oh man, I really want to see that made over all the edited classical Hollywood movies that
I don't know though, man. You haven't seen what I'm going to do with American Graffiti, where all of instead of the doo-wop music, they're just listening to Tokyo Rose propaganda broadcasts. Like, I'm telling you, it's going to be great. It's all Rush Limbaugh and Tokyo Rose.
Stop.
Hell yeah. Fun fact just occurred to me is like in Calcutta, which used to be run by the Communist Party of India for decades, they named the street where the U.S. Embassy is located Ho Chi Minh Street. Just a little thumb in the eye to the imperialists.
That is cool.
And
Wow.
there's a big Lenin statue in town. There's like a Maxim Gorky Street. There's a lot of Soviet type things there. And I was there last December and got to see all that stuff. It was pretty cool.
My oldest daughter just went to the free city of Derry in Northern Ireland and sent me back pictures of just Irish pubs with pictures of Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara. And I was like, how? It was like the end of the age of innocence where the old guy can't go see what was she, the Countess, because I was like, in my soul, I am going there. But I didn't know that about old Calcutta. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. It was a communist stronghold. It still kind of is, but not quite to the level as it was. Kerala, on the other hand, is currently, and that's in the south of India. So there's little pockets where the Communist Party is in control, and they have like a centralized economy. And so, the Calcutta Film Festival is in this fantastic like film palace where, all these great, it's an international film festival, and that was built during the time. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, Adam.
I feel the same way. Yeah, there's not a lot of film conversations going on that have this hue and poignant view. So I really genuinely appreciate you guys. And anytime you ever want to have me come back and gab or talk about something, I'm here.
Okay, well that is wonderful
We'll
to
take you
hear
up on
'cause,
it.
yeah, you may be tired of yeah, we'll definitely take you up on it. Well, let's turn to the final segment then and get some recommendations. And we usually recommend a movie. You can do more than one, or a book, or whatever you want, really. Something that connects to what we've been talking about today. So maybe I'll just start with you, Adam, if you're ready to go.
Really, well, there's a recent movie which is up for award consideration that just knocked me over, which is Jafar Panahi's It Was Just an Accident. Holy moly, like some of the darkest laughs. I like he's somehow able to make a movie about the lingering effects of torture and then have slapstick comedy and then go to full emotional release. So if you haven't seen that, see it. The second movie I would say is a Russian movie I watched, what was it, like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, called Leviathan. And I think it's a really good movie for Americans to watch right now because we're probably already there as far as the post-Soviet Russia depiction they show of wall-to-wall corruption, nihilism. And it's amazing that a Russian filmmaker was allowed to make that. So those are my two.
I haven't seen the new Panahi film, but I've seen several of his films. I'm a big fan. I love his work. It's incredible what he does within tight constraints,
Mm.
like filming an entire movie in a taxi cab. How about Paul or Tony? What do you got?
Yeah, I don't have anything as like fun as Adam's. I've got I've got a collection of essays. So there's a great collection called A Little Solitaire, John Frankenheimer, an American film, and it's edited by Murray Pomerantz and R. Barton Palmer. But it's just a collection of mostly academic essays about seconds, and then other Frankenheimer films or essays about Manchurian Candidate. And it's just a great little collection that can really help like open up some of these conversations. And if you watch the film and listen to the episode and sort of want to get a little bit more about some of the themes that we're teasing out, it's a great place to start.
Love it.
Good rep.
What's it called again?
It's called A Little Solitaire, John Frankenheimer and American Film.
Love it. All right.
Well, just because he came up and to such great excitement, I'm going to go ahead and recommend the Black Ho Chi Minh and the Black Race, which is a
Ooh.
collection that was put out by Dae Trung Nguyen, and it's actually kind of difficult to get in the United States. You might have to talk to your Canadian comrades to find a copy, but it was instrumental in the research that I did with Dr. Horn on our piece about Ho Chi Minh and Black liberation, which you can find on the Peace, Land, and Bread journal. And because I agree that Ho Chi Minh is one of the most important figures of the 20th century. And in this work in question, there's sort of a mythology about Ho Chi Minh in the United States because he did spend time here as a very young person. He was a waiter, as Adam mentioned. He was a baker at some point. He was inspired by Garveyism. That's a confluence of two internationalist movements that I think people need to spend more time focusing on. And of course, he wins these two anti-imperialist wars that should not be forgotten. So that's my recommendation for this evening.
So my recommendation, and it's just another Frankenheimer movie. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but these three films by Frankenheimer do kind of comprise a paranoia trilogy before the Alan J. Pakula paranoia trilogy, which are The Manchurian Candidate, which we're going to cover later on this podcast, 1962, 7 Days in May, and Seconds. And so what I want to recommend is 7 Days in May, which I had never seen before. And it's a really fascinating film because it's about a military coup d'etat that is deterred. It stars Burt Lancaster as this general, and there's a conspiracy afoot, and Kirk Douglas is another general, and Kirk Douglas is loyal to the United States Constitution, and Lancaster isn't. And it's really fascinating, especially for 1964. It's well made, and for some reason, it's kind of overlooked. So that's my recommendation. So, guys, I think that's going to be it. I want to say many, many thanks again to Adam. You were awesome. It was fun. We will hit you up at some point in the future. If you ever like, hey, let's talk about this, you got a standing invitation to come on at any point. But yeah, it was a pleasure to have you.
No, what a treat. And obviously I had read your writing before, Jason, and really enjoyed it. But to get to meet all three of you and hear your points of view, like, yeah, any time you want to chop it up about any subject, call me. Big fan.
Will do. Very humbled and
Yeah.
also big fans of your work. I hope there's
Thank you.
something down the pipeline coming up. Another feature.
I have three different projects going. One is a big climate epic, which I've been trying to finish for the last year and a half. And then I have a series that's a film noir series that's kind of
Ooh.
about climate and corporate corruption. And then I have a adaptation of an old movie called Miracle Mile, which I'm finally almost done with. And then we still have that series, even though HBO let it go, we still have Parasite. Our series is called Parasites, and it looks like that's going to get on its feet. And that is really a cool, like, director Bong is super excited. So yeah, we've got a lot and
Nice.
always producing. We just did the Chair Company, which I
Hmm.
think you guys would
So
enjoy.
good.
Yeah,
So
and
good.
so
I
yeah,
saw you produce the documentary Union, right, about the Amazon unionization.
yeah.
Hmm.
That's cool.
So good. And they actually, I guess, to some degree, premiered it on Criterion. And
Yeah.
anyone who hasn't seen it, it's excellent. And we have a short film that's nominated for an Academy Award called All the Empty Rooms, that is emotionally one of the most gutting projects I've ever been a part of. It's about gun violence and
Hmm.
the kids who are killed and images of their rooms because the parents never change their rooms. But
Hmm.
yeah, really, really powerful, an incredible team put it together. So yeah, Hyperobject is our company. And then we have Yellow Dot that does climate stuff. So check out either.
Somebody's coming behind you with a drill right now as we
Oh
speak.
no. Ah!
You
Brought to you
Megadeth.
by
Yeah.
Paramount.
This episode is sponsored by Paramount too.
All right, gents, what a pleasure. Be
Thank you
well.
so much.
Thank you.
Take care, man.
Want to continue the conversation? Drop us a line at any time at coldwarcinemapod@gmail.com. To stay up to date with Cold War Cinema, follow along at www.coldwarcinema.com or find us elsewhere online on Blue Sky at coldwarcinema.com, on X at cold_war_cinema, or on Instagram at Cold War Cinema Podcast. And stay in touch with us personally. Jason on X at Jason A. Christian and on Blue Sky at jasonachristian.bsky.social. Tony on X at Tony J. Ballas and on Blue Sky at tonyjballas.bsky.social. And Paul on Blue Sky and everywhere else at ptklein.com. Like and subscribe to Cold War Cinema, and don't forget to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.